Dun, 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 dun. Ah, that's way better. John Philip Sousa, start off the podcast. Welcome to the Pint of No Return show. This is season 5, episode 12, where we get our queen on.
Queen?
Yeah. Tonight, the beer we drink is a great one from the Sierra Nevada folks. The Hazy Little Thing IPA. Don't you get it? This is a Gary sent beer that we're going to dive into. We are sans Keith this evening. Well, he may join a little bit later. It's been a little while since we've podcasted, so I've got to kind of get my mind back in the groove of podcasting.
A little while.
A little while. I checked the show notes, and our last show was in August.
Yeah, we're a quarterly podcast now.
Yeah, we're becoming a semi-annual affair. But we've got to start podcasting regularly now because we're into Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
Already a week into October. So anyway, I am Rob, and with me is Gary. And as I mentioned before, we are without Keith. This is a podcast where we take the same beer from different parts of the country. Together we drink, we chat, we talk, we rate, and then we see what's kind of coming up in our tiny little minds. So Gary is a huge fan of the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company.
I am.
And tell us a little bit about this beer if you know anything about it.
Well, it was brewed probably a year ago now, which you're not supposed to, you're supposed to drink IPAs fresh.
Yeah. Doesn't matter to me.
It was February, so it's it's been a while.
Older.
And it is jumping on the hazy bandwagon of IPAs. Sierra Nevada brewed a Hazy Little Thing IPA. And IPAs in general are supposed to be, you drink them when they're fresh, they're generally better. Stone's had their Enjoy by series that's just, supposed to drink within 45 days of brewing or something like that. And hazy IPAs are even more so are supposed to be drinking fresh. Like they are best when you get them, within a very short amount of time of when they were produced. So we are well beyond the normal lifespan of a hazy IPA with this one, but that's what happens when you do a quarterly podcast and
that's
you don't really drink a lot of beer.
It's true. So. I mean, it's been a devil of a time trying to get us together to podcast. We've had kid issues. Well, I haven't, but the other guys have had kid issues and sicknesses and illnesses and trips and
there's been stuff.
Usually in the fall, things kind of calm down, but if anything, it's gotten worse.
We thought, school's starting; it'll be easier. But that's
yes.
So anyway, one of the deals with this beer is that it was one of the first mass-produced hazy IPAs. There was some question about whether hazy IPAs could be produced at volume in the way that Sierra Nevada, obviously, they brew in at least 2 locations domestically. They just thought because of this style, it's suited more toward the small batch, and can they really create that hazy style in a large batch brewing? And when you have this fresh, I would say they did it. We'll see how it's done over time, though. But it is not as hazy as a lot of the hazy IPAs. I poured mine off here, and you can still see through it. I've had some that are completely 100% opaque.
Yeah, mine is pretty opaque.
Yeah.
And it's got the 2 main hops aromas that you usually look for in IPAs are either the pine or the floral, I should say, the floral smelling hops and the more citrusy or grapefruit smelling hops. This would definitely be on the citrusy side.
Yeah, most of the hazy IPAs are very citrusy. Some of them taste like straight up pineapple juice or something like that. But yeah, so this is
that aroma is darn close to pineapple juice.
Yeah, that's
6.7% ABV, which is on the lower side, I think, for an IPA.
Yeah.
or lower than average. Let me say that.
Yeah, usually they're clocking in around 7, so it's just a little bit.
So, and they got a pretty foamy head for an IPA as well. At least I do.
Yeah, mine foamed up pretty good too. That could be a factor of the age of this one too. And it's still got a lot of bubbles going on. So,
all right. Well, it's been a while since we've delved into some beer, so why don't we partake and enjoy ourselves this Oktoberfest? Prost!
It's lost a little bit of its edge.
I actually will say that makes it a little more palatable to me. It does lack the edge of most IPAs that I'm used to.
Yeah,
that really hard biting hops flavor is there, but it's a little more understated.
Yeah. So this is an unfiltered IPA, which is kind of a part of the whole hazy part of it, is that you get that unfiltered, and that's one of the things about the mass-produced beers. Generally you want to filter those. But yeah, this was definitely better. Let's say 6 months ago, when it was supposed to be drinking.
So you have had this before.
I have had, because I have had this before. And I enjoyed it. It had a lot of fruit flavor in it. It had a lot of, very citrusy, pineapple-y, like great in the warm weather kind of feel. This has like been the summer of hazy East Coast IPAs, and this was probably among the first ones that I've had that was more mass produced, and then sort of in the last this year really. There's just been so many of them, and some of them have a lot of flavor. This, like I said, I think was probably better a while ago, but you still get like remnants of what they intended with this beer.
On the other side of the equation, if you haven't listened to the show before, I tend not to be a fan of the IPAs. I have found a few over the years that I've enjoyed. Just the bitterness of the hops just doesn't really seem to appeal to me, which the boys constantly tease me that means I'm not a real beer drinker. But I like to think of myself just as a different beer drinker. So where Gary may find this a little less on the biting side and a little less flavorful than he's previously enjoyed, I actually kind of like the smoothness that it offers. Maybe the aging is a little bit more conducive to my palate. So, but the hops are definitely there. They just don't attack your taste buds like a normal IPA does. Perhaps it just kind of lays there, which isn't all that bad.
No, it's not. It's definitely, it's not bad. I wouldn't say like I had one that it was literally like a green color. It was like a bad batch of beer. This is not there. This is still a good beer, and it's just that it's toned down a lot. Which, like you said, for you, that's probably a really good thing.
That's right there.
I'm going to be using the rating that I gave it on Untapped when I checked into it. When was the first time I checked in? Does it actually give me a date? January 21st of this year. So almost 10 months ago was the first time I had it. So I'll be using that rating, not the rating of what I'm getting now. If you're really into the hazy IPAs, you probably already had this. But if you haven't had it, definitely get a can that's more fresh than what we've got, because it does lose something over time.
Yeah. So we'll continue to enjoy this throughout the episode, and we'll give you a little bit of a rating at the end, our final thoughts, as it were. And we'll move on to some topics and things that maybe caught our eye this week. I actually kind of wanted to talk about what podcasts maybe we're listening to. We did that a while back, and it's always good to revisit that. So we'll check in and see what we're listening to. But I want to start with first, since I have just Gary and I. Gary and I share a kind of a common affinity for both Star Wars and the Marvel Universe. And now they are synergistic, being in the same company. So the news today, which Garrett, I'm not sure if you heard or not, but they have announced they will be doing a Black Widow movie starring Scarlett Johansson.
Did see headlines. I haven't read any of the articles on it. I just saw the headline. I'm pulling one up now. But yeah, that's exciting. I think that's great. We kind of knew it was coming. Like they're running out of Avengers, right? You know, the next Infinity War movie is the last of this series, and you know, we're assuming that lots of things are going to change, and Hawkeye's going to become Captain America or something like that. Yeah. Right? So, So they need to keep the franchise going in some way. So going now to the sort of secondary heroes, you know, because Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, those are the big ones. And now they're getting into the other stuff. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to it. I will certainly be going to the theater to see this, and it doesn't hurt that Scarlett Johansson is there.
Yeah. Well, I think there's three things at play, right? First of all, they're running to the end of the contracts of their main cast. You know, Chris Evans announced a couple of weeks ago that he's kind of, or at least it's hinting that he's kind of bidding farewell to Captain America in the next film. And then, so there's that. So they have to kind of keep the franchise alive. They've been screaming for we have been screaming for a Black Widow movie for years. I mean, she's first debuted in Iron Man 2, which is like back in 2010, I think.
She was. I thought she was in the first Iron Man.
No, second Iron Man. Second for sure.
Oh, that's right. When they have to break into the facility with it. Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, it's been 8 years that she's been a part of this franchise, and she's been in a lot of the films.
Six times.
Yeah,
she's appeared in 6 of the movies, which is a lot. Like Captain America.
And Black Widow. Black Widow is a great character. There is a lot of material there. To mine. Basically, she's, if you know her story, Natasha Romanoff, she was kind of a Russian wunderkind that was kind of brought along in their spy program and taught to be an assassin, and she eventually split and joined SHIELD, and eventually became part of the Avengers. So it's it's kind of there's a really deep story that you can mine there that hasn't been explored yet, that's been really hinted at in the Avengers films and the other films, that there's some dark history that she has.
They've shown some like flashback scenes in oh god, what was the one with the first Avengers movie? Oh yeah, it was the first combined Avengers movie where the witch was like going into her mind.
The Scarlet Witch,
Scarlet Witch was going into her. I get the colors confused. Black Scarlet, and so they showed flashbacks from her past in that movie. So that's where you got the most hints about her history. So hopefully this movie goes into that. It'll be interesting if it isn't. I haven't heard anything about the plot.
No, I mean just announced today.
Yeah, but an origin story makes a lot of sense. Although
But it needs to somehow tie into the overall Avengers or Marvel Universe story.
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
Even the secondary films like Ant-Man somehow ties in. Right. And then the third reason I was going to mention was that with the departing characters or the departing actors, especially the likes of Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Hemsworth, you need a big star to kind of anchor the franchise, and Scarlett Johansson she's been around for a long while, and she's a big star. And even kind of a fourth reason is that they've been saying for a while they need to have more female-driven superhero movies. Now they are going to be doing Captain Marvel, which coming out next summer, which looks amazing,
so good,
amazing.
Well, I will just say as a side note that my daughters are so excited for Captain Marvel. I don't know that I have seen them as excited for a Marvel movie as they are for that one.
Right. And I love the fact that they're doing it as an early 90s movie.
Yeah.
Or taking place in the early 90s. You can do pretty much whatever you want in your own little bubble. Samuel L. Jackson's coming back as Nick Fury without his eye patch.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Jude Law is in there as well. It's going to be really, really good. And of course, the Captain Marvel story will somehow eventually tie into the sequel for the Avengers,
which was
Infinity Wars,
which was clearly tied into Infinity
right.
War.
Yeah. And what we're going to find out too, what you'll find out if you're not part of the Marvel kind of mythology, is that Captain Marvel is probably one of the most powerful superheroes in the entire Marvel universe.
Yeah.
She's going to be amazing. So Black Widow, by contrast, is kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum.
Right.
She's a badass, absolutely
no
badass,
superpowers,
but no superpowers at
it's
all.
It's just all skill and training.
She's very much into spycraft and stealth and subterfuge, all that kind of stuff. So that should be great. Yeah. Really looking forward to that. That's awesome. And Scarlett Johansson was due. I mean, she really is a big enough star to carry her own.
Did we even mention the price that she's reportedly getting?
She's getting $15 million.
Yeah, Marvel has disputed that. Marvel says that is not accurate and they do not disclose salaries. So,
it's been my experience that those reports tend to be more accurate than they're not accurate.
Yeah. Even if it's not 15 million, if it's 13.5, whatever, that's interesting. In the article I'm looking at on CBS News, fun fact that Robert Downey Jr. got paid for the first Iron Man movie. You want to venture a guess? Did you see that number?
I read the article. $500,000.
$500,000 for the first Iron Man movie.
And for the Avengers movie?
Oh, much more.
50 million.
Yeah, much.
He made 100 times that number for the first Avengers movie. $50 million. And word is out that he got a percentage of the profits. A decimal percentage.
Which is great because Infinity War has made over $2 billion. So even if you got a 0.5% of $2 billion, I'll take that.
Oh my God, yeah. So so 15 million, which this article, and I think we're referencing the same article, is the same amount that Chris Hemsworth was paid for Thor Ragnarok, and Chris Evans was paid for his latest Captain America sequel. So that's great. I mean, that's awesome.
Fair.
And she deserves it. She's a great part of that franchise. Absolutely.
She has been a, I don't know what the word is, but very consistent and, not the central character, but a very important character in a lot of ways.
She has some great moments.
Yeah. Winter Soldier, she was like a key part of that movie.
Oh yeah.
And so she deserves to be paid for this movie what a leading actor is paid for the other movies.
Yeah.
So
and Winter Soldier, by the way, just as long as we're talking about Winter Soldier, my favorite film of this entire universe is going to be Infinity War. I think it's probably one of the most perfectly constructed superhero films ever, maybe dating back to the original Superman movie. It's just a fantastic movie. But right up there for me is Winter Soldier.
That's a good movie. There's a lot in that movie that's so really good.
It's more of a spy thriller than a superhero movie. It really, really is.
Robert Redford's role in that movie was just perfect.
Oh, fantastic! Absolutely. So, good things, man. That's really awesome. I'm very psyched about that.
Yeah. Right. I'm looking forward to that one.
So after another sip of beer.
Yep. Or two.
Yeah. Podcasting. Podcasting, it's no news to anyone, is probably one of the main ways that people get their audio entertainment these days. I think I read an article a couple of weeks ago that the stock prices and the membership levels for services like Sirius XM and high def radio, all of a sudden, I mean, they just have bottomed out, and ratings for regular radio have just gone down the tubes. I can verify that for myself. If I'm not listening to a podcast in the car, I'm listening to an audiobook. I don't listen to the radio anymore. No. I only have my Sirius XM radio now for my traffic information. I've downgraded my membership to I just get traffic. So
That's funny. Yeah, I my daughter actually listens to the radio quite a bit in her car. My wife still listens to the local news station here, and I will listen to like the news station if I want to get a traffic update, but usually I just look on my phone for that.
yeah.
Or if there's like an event happening, like if there's a major thing going on, like a year ago at this time we had the fires and stuff like that. So I'll listen for that stuff. But even that, they're behind.
Yeah.
So I just
And yeah,
I don't need a radio
for news. Honestly, what I will do in my car is like, before I leave the parking lot, if I want to listen to the news or to ESPN or something like that, I'll just punch up that app on my phone on Hulu or something and just play it and just listen to it through the radio.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So, but podcasting's right up there for me. So I thought what we would do, which we did a few, maybe a season ago, or two, is talk about what we're listening to in terms of podcasts. Maybe some that we just listen to for entertainment, others we may listen to for informatives, and maybe it's just some weird off the wall things. So Gary, let's put it to you first. What is at the top of your podcast playlist these days?
Actually, I haven't been listening to a lot of podcasts lately. I've since the last time we podcasted, I started re-listening to the Harry Potter audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
And
let's do this. Let's make it a podcasting / audiobooks.
Right. Yeah, that's the only way I can be part of this conversation. So yeah, I'm on the book 5 at this point.
Word of the
so yeah, which going after I read all the books as they came out, right, and I've listened to most of them in the past, and read all of them, and saw all the movies, and going back and listening to them again after having quite a break from the whole Harry Potter universe. It's just so good. It's like there's so much that you miss of details that she wove into stories in the second or third, more than not so much the first one, but certainly the second or third and fourth books that carry through, that is going to be there later because you've already read the books or seen the movies and stuff. But a lot of little things that you would have never picked up on at the time because you didn't know everything, and now that you do, you pick up on it. And you're like, oh, how did she really plan that out at that level of detail, or was that coincidence? So they're just so good. So I'm Jim Dale, who's the narrator of those books, is he is phenomenal. He is just absolutely phenomenal. To the point that when I watch the movies, I think there's something wrong with the actors because their voices don't sound right to me. Yeah,
that's funny.
So that's been the bulk of my listening, and my commute is 15 minutes, so I don't get a lot of time. So I've had a couple of trips for work, and when you're on a 6-hour plane flight, you can get through a lot of audio. So I've done a lot of listening there. But in terms of podcasts, I will tell you the 3 podcasts that are on my main playlist. I have a playlist that's called Main. I use Overcast as my podcast app of choice. I think it's great. And
I do as well.
Yeah. I think that's been a pick for all of us at some point in the past, has been Overcast. So Upgrade, which is off the Relay.fm network. It is a primarily Apple-focused podcast. It's a weekly show, but they cover a lot of tech stuff, and they actually have recently started covering kind of streaming entertainment kind of news. Not so much entertainment in general, but kind of as it relates to kind of the Netflix, Amazon, Hulu kind of arena things. Like Netflix, obviously, scooping up talent, scooping up scripts, and buying rights to properties. Apple is getting in the game. They've made a lot of purchases, so they'll talk about that kind of stuff too. So that's up there. I listen to that on a pretty regular basis. I am a few behind on that because I've been listening to Harry Potter. The other one that I still have dropped into quite a bit is Daily Tech News Show. Tom Merritt and crew doing their thing. They're great. Even if you listen to the first few minutes of it just to kind of get the headlines, which these days I'm doing more of that type of listening just because I want to get back to Harry Potter. So Daily Tech News Show, it is a great tech news podcast and has kept me very informed over the years. And then the third podcast I listen to on a pretty consistent basis is Download, also off of Relay FM, which is one of the same hosts off of Upgrade, but it's a more general tech news podcast where they will do about 3 tech stories, and he'll have guest commentators essentially come on, usually two people come on, and they kind of run through like the top 3 headlines in the tech world in a week. So, when Apple has their event, it's about Apple. Microsoft had an event recently, so there was a lot about Microsoft stuff. So they'll cover the gamut of the tech industry. So it's nice to get that. And they always have a fuzzy puppy update every week where it's just a nice, usually puppy related story to make you feel good. So those are the 3 that I listen to on the most consistent basis. And I got others I can go through kind of as the secondary playlist, but I'll let you have a chance to go through your primary audio.
Yeah, well, I'll do podcasts. I'm going to talk about podcasts first, then I'll talk about some audiobooks that I've been listening to, because I kind of actually have been migrating back over into audiobooks lately, which I haven't done in a while, but I still do listen to podcasts quite regularly. One I've been listening to recently is Wolverine: The Long Night. It is a podcast that's been put out by Marvel. And it is a standalone story about Logan, the Wolverine, and it takes place in a small town in Alaska. And it's kind of told almost in a detective noir kind of format, with characters acting it out, and it's done really, really well. The guy who plays Wolverine is Richard Armitage, which you'll remember as Thorin from the Hobbit movies. It also has on it Scott Adsit, who was on 30 Rock, Bob Balaban, who is a really popular comic actor from like the Best in Show, Mighty Winds movies. Brian Stokes Mitchell, who's a great.
That was a great Mighty Wind. That was so funny.
Yeah, Brian Stokes Mitchell, who's a phenomenal Broadway actor, and so they are. It's ongoing right now. I don't know how many episodes it's going to be. They're about anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes long, so they're short.
Yeah.
And they're on episode 6 right now, so you can just kind of get in and they listen really, really quickly.
It looks like they started in August, so not too long.
Yeah, they do an episode like about once a week or so. And it's just really, really well done. As you know, if you're Marvel or Disney, you can throw a lot of money at literally everything, which means podcasts too. So
it's great. I added that one. I'm actually going to tell my kids.
Yeah, it's really good. It's very gritty too. It's not a kid's podcast. It's gritty Wolverine, which is kind of the Wolverine that everyone likes.
For those that don't know, my kids are all my youngest got her driver's license since the last podcast. So
wow.
Which is another story.
Well, something gritty is really kind of up your alley then.
Yeah.
Then my second one I listened to, and this is kind of a carryover from I think the last time we discussed it, the Secret Cabal gaming podcast. If you've been a listener to this show for any length of time, you know I'm a big board game fan, and the Secret Cabal is a kind of a well-known podcast in the board games world, which kind of sounds like it would be like the Watching Paint Dry podcast. But if you can imagine the Pint of No Return guys, basically the same podcast, but talking about board games. Very much a relaxed kind of a shoot the shit kind of an atmosphere, and that's what the Secret Cabal is. And it's really well done. It's really relaxed, and I just kind of like the rapport that the guys have with one another. So that's a great one too. Let's Let's see. I'm scanning through here. I'll tell you when I'm about to start. How about that? That I'm really looking forward to. And it's called Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. I've been kind of being sucked into alternative history fiction of late. Man in the High Castle just started up its new season. So excited.
I gotta watch that.
So this guy, Dan Carlin, he's a journalist and a broadcaster. He has a really interesting way of thinking about modern events and applying them to past history. For example, what would Alexander the Great be like if he was the Führer instead of Adolf Hitler?
What would it be like if he was Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah. If the Apache Indians had modern weapons.
America has a different history.
What would have happened? If our civilization falls like Rome, what would that look like? So it's very much kind of a historical podcast, but more of a what if, or how would this look? So I'm really, it's been recommended to me by more than one person. So I'm looking forward to it. The only problem I have, and I may have to go find a different podcast app to see, but the problem is there's 62 episodes in, and I can only get the last 12. I can't find the original ones. I mean, it dates all the way back to 2013.
They probably don't have them in their feed because they're probably streaming off of some Lisbon or one of those providers. So they may have them archived somewhere else.
And they're really, I mean, he makes them very sporadically, like almost once every 6 months. But the podcasts themselves are anywhere from 3.5 to 6 hours long.
Holy crap.
I mean,
it's like a novel.
Yeah, he does a let's see, The Destroyer of Worlds. What happens if human beings can't handle the power of their own weaponry? This show examines the dangerous early years of the nuclear age and humankind's effort to avoid self-destruction at the hand of its own creation. And that's 5 hours and 49 minutes long. So it'll be an investment, but I probably can listen to an episode, one episode during an entire week. Because my commute, unlike Gary's, is 50 minutes, 50 minutes both ways. So I have a little bit more time in the car.
Yeah.
So there's that.
That sounds like something I want to pick up on my next trip. Listen to that on the plane kind of thing.
Yeah. And then for audiobooks, I have 2 series I want to recommend to you. One I've talked about before, and I know Keith is a huge fan of, and it's kind of topical right now.
We don't want to talk about Keith.
Yeah, he is dead to us.
Yeah.
I just recently re-listened to the very first installment of The Wheel of Time on audiobook. And The Wheel of Time, if you don't know, is a high fantasy series. It is the best-selling fantasy series in book format of any series in history, with the exception of Lord of the Rings. It's the highest-selling fantasy series of all time. So it's a very in-depth, deep world with obviously a lot of fantasy elements to it, but it has a lot of relationship and kind of philosophy elements to it, as well as like how men and women deal with each other and, or don't deal with each other, rather. So it's really, really good. I just finished the first one. I'm right on to the second one. And it's topical because just last week, Amazon announced that they have partnered with Sony and will be finally putting together a Wheel of Time series. Original series for Amazon Prime, which is awesome news. You know that Amazon and Sony will throw a ton of money at it. The guy that they got to run it is very much a fan of the series, which is always good. You want someone who is really deep and invested in the characters and the world. He's very much likened to Benioff and Weiss, who are the executive producers of Game of Thrones. They're huge fans of the series. They're very devoted. He says, I know how it looks. I know how I want it to look. I know how I want it to be. And it's exactly like the book. So hopefully those will be good things. And then the second book series I want to recommend to you, actually kind of touching on the Wheel of Time, is a series called The Reckoners. And The Reckoners is written by Brandon Sanderson, who actually finished the Wheel of Time series. And I say finished because Robert Jordan is the author. He wrote the first 10 books. There are 14 in the series. Unfortunately, after book 10, he passed away. So they brought in a young, at the time, writer by the name of Brandon Sanderson to finish it off. They went off of Robert Jordan's notes. They knew how he wanted it to proceed and how he wanted it to end, and they had him finish it off. And while it was different than Jordan, everyone pretty much agrees that it was done very, very well. So he, a writer of his own original stuff, writes a story about the Reckoners. And the Reckoners takes place in a kind of near future world where some kind of spatial event has caused some people to develop superpowers, almost like the Fantastic Four. Everybody has different power or type of power, but not everyone, just certain people. And while that kind of sounds like a lot of different books and series out there and movies, that's happened quite a bit. Fantastic Four, as I mentioned, being one of them. The difference here is every single one of these people, who they call epics in the book, every single one of these people have turned evil. They're all supervillains. And they have subjugated the world. They have their own little city-states that they run and rule with iron fists. There are more powerful epics than others. Some epics have taken control of other epics and kind of let them be their captains, almost like the mafia. So the Reckoners are a group of ordinary human beings, kind of almost like a Navy SEAL team, whose job it is to try to take out epics. And to do that, they have to find out what each epic's weakness is. It's different for every single epic, but every epic has at least one.
Okay,
the greatest
that sounds really interesting.
Yeah. The greatest of all epics is Steelheart, who's very much like a Superman character. And he runs the city of New Chicago, or New Chicago, as it's called. And he is unbeatable, undefeatable. Can't defeat him. Except one kid comes along who's not actually part of the Reckoners when the story starts. He saw something when he was a little boy that changed him forever, and he thinks he actually might know what Steelheart's weakness is. So he's trying to use that to join the Reckoners and bring down this incredible epic. So the first one, it's 3 books in this series. Steelheart, which I finished. I'm currently in the second one, which is called Firefight, and the last one is called Calamity. So it's very, very well done, great characters, and a really easy, quick read.
I gotta write that down.
So it's called The Reckoners.
So
anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I generally listen to, well, when I'm okay, I said short commute, don't listen to a lot on there, which is why I like some of those tech podcasts, because they have short segments and I can
they're quick hits for sure. Yeah.
You know, I can get a segment in on the way to work and another one on the way back.
Whereas I, who have a longer commute, can devote more time to something a bit longer. Sure.
But I will often listen to podcasts while I'm doing yard work, like you know, mowing the lawn, trimming bushes, whatever. If I have to, like, I've been building this little studio for my wife to do her floral business, and that has, you know, I have to think about what I'm doing, so I can't listen to an audio book or podcast while I'm doing that. But if it's kind of like, you know, routine stuff, I'll listen to that. So that's my other way of listening to podcasts is not just in the car. I'll do it while I'm, you know, putzing around the yard, as I tend to often do. So quick, we're kind of getting near time. So if we're going to do any like picks like we usually do, we'll have to post time. Some of the other podcasts that I have that I am still catching in my feed and downloading, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which is a fantasy fiction podcast, which has a lot of very interesting stories. If you're into fantasy fiction, usually they're like in a half-hour range, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter, but half hour is a good benchmark. Still catching Escape Pod, which is science fiction. Science fiction, so fiction, yeah. Also very good. And Liftoff, which is it's kind of like a tech podcast, but it is all about space news. So they'll talk about what's going on with NASA, SpaceX, Blue Orbit, all of that kind of stuff. They will also occasionally do like a series of more informational things, like kind of what you get in astronomy class, like run through talking about different, the planets, different moons of different planets and stuff like that, or Apollo missions or things like that. So they'll talk about stuff like that. So it's an interesting show if you're into space and stuff like that. That one's generally a little bit longer in the 45-minute range, maybe an hour or so. So those are kind of the backup if I run out of things to listen to in the normal weekly kind of stuff I do. Then I get into those that are not as timely oriented.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's see if I have one more recommendation to throw at you guys this week. Let's see. What other TV shows I started watching?
Oh God, so many. My wife. I'll give you one. Funny about a TV show. You mentioned for Game of Thrones. My daughter has a friend who lives out, more rural. Kind of lives pretty rural. Has a little bit of land. She just recently got a new horse, and this was a horse that was actually on Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. So they think Arya might have ridden the horse in one of the early episodes in the first season, but it was a former Game of Thrones horse star. Is nice. Now residing at my daughter. So
has the fame gone to its head? I mean, is it
really? No, my daughter's very, very, very lovely horse. The Tunnel. It's on Amazon Prime right now. Mm-hmm. If you're into kind of police detective mystery types of things, it's very interesting. It starts off with a murder where the body is found in the tunnel, the train tunnel that goes under the English Channel from England to France. Mm-hmm. But the body is placed in a service tunnel because they have the trains running on one, then they have other tunnels that are for service, right? Mm-hmm. But it's placed on the line between England and France.
Okay. So whose jurisdiction is it?
That's part of the story. So it becomes a joint investigation, and it turns into a larger story. And so they're constantly going back and forth between England and France with this stuff happening in this police detective movie. So I think it was produced by maybe it was on BBC originally, but it aired on PBS stuff here in the States. But it's called The Tunnel. Mm-hmm. And it's a different pacing and different setup than a lot of American crime dramas, which to me is part of the charm of the show. Is that I like the way it's done better than a lot of the American crime dramas. Okay. So
sticking with Amazon Prime, I would like to recommend to you, if you haven't watched it yet, the Jack Ryan series.
Oh,
with John Krasinski.
Yeah, we went through that so fast.
I am a huge fan of the Tom Clancy novels and the movies, actually. None of them are obviously true faithful to their books, because they can't be. If you've ever read a Tom Clancy book, you know that you cannot fit that into a 2-hour movie. Can't be done. But the adaptations were very, very good. I even like the ones that were not as well received, like Sum of All Fears, which is the Ben Affleck one. I thought was really pretty good. Yeah. Even though that the story was changed dramatically from the book. Yeah. Anyway, so the Jack Ryan series is, using Clancy's main character of Jack Ryan, but it doesn't have any of his original source material. Tom Clancy, of course, passing away quite a while ago. But it's just based on the character and in that universe. John Krasinski from, him as Jim from The Office, comic, very funny actor. You wouldn't necessarily think of as a dramatic actor, but if you saw him this past year in A Quiet Place film with Emily Blunt, he can pull off drama. And he does a fantastic job as Jack Ryan. It might be up there with one of my favorite interpretations of the character.
Yeah.
And the writing, the plot, which I won't say, I'm not going to even say anything about it. I'm not going to spoil a single thing about the plot. Go out and watch it right now. But I will tell you that the plot that they wrote for a 10 episode, I think it was 10 or 8 maybe. A 10 episode, 8?
I think it seemed like it went by really fast.
Was so fantastically done and woven. And there were so many great moments and twists and turns. And, really, I have not been surprised by a TV show like that in quite a while. Maybe since the first season or two of Homeland have I been surprised that much in a TV show. I can't say that of Game of Thrones because I know what's going to happen in Game of Thrones. Still well done, but I know what's going to happen. Anyway, the Jack Ryan series, highly recommend it. Very, very well done. They put out some previews of what's going to happen next year. I'm very, very excited about that. Each season is going to be its own self-contained story, which I think is great. It's kind of its own little anthology. You don't have to string out villains and characters and plots. You can give them the appropriate amount of tension, and then just like a Tom Clancy book, you move on to the next one.
I actually really like that about it because there are so many programs, series these days that you get to the end of a season and it resolves whatever the main thing was, but there's always this cliffhanger where you're going on to the next thing, and it's like, and then there's this long break between them. And I liked that this Jack Ryan series, it wrapped it up. Like, you want more, you definitely want more, but they ended it, and you know how it ends. They left a few things at the end where you're like, oh, I wonder how that's, I wonder what's going to happen with this or that. But it's not like you're sitting there for 6 months going, God,
but those weren't. I know what you're talking about. Those weren't key parts of the plot. They're just no. They could take this somewhere else if they wanted to. And
yeah, exactly. But they wrapped it up, which was really nice. But I agree with you. It was a great series. My whole family watched it.
It was really well done and beautifully shot. It was like it had the budget. Obviously, if you're Amazon, you can throw money like that at it. Beautifully shot. It looked. Every episode looked like a movie.
Yeah. And it was so if you haven't seen it or don't know, it's Jack Ryan when he's a young CIA analyst, essentially. So a lot of the, when you get into the movies, Hunt for Red October or Clear and Present Danger and all that kind of things, or Patriot Games, which is still my favorite of the movies. He's a little bit more mature. He's married, has kids, and all that kind of stuff. And this is a young bachelor Jack Ryan trying to find his way in the CIA.
Who is obviously brilliant and it sees things in a way that not many people can see, but makes mistakes, makes a lot of mistakes,
and doesn't understand the bureaucracy. He doesn't understand the bureaucracy at this point. Which
I don't either. I'm actually hoping, because I am kind of a Tom Clancy nut. I hope that the show is on long enough to maybe approach the Debt of Honor storyline. There are many, many more big things in Jack Ryan's future. If you've read the Tom Clancy books, I won't talk about, but I hope they do go that way. Obviously, as Krasinski gets a little older, he'll be able to handle that. Let's just say his position in the government increases over the course of the Clancy book. So give Jack Ryan a watch. It was awesome. Very good.
I agree.
All right, let's rate this beer and let's call it a day. So you're going to use the same rating you used last time you drank this back in January. And what was that rating, Gary?
That was we're 10. 10?
Yes, out of 10.
So I will round up to an 8.
All right.
Out of 10. This one it lost a couple of points, but it's an 8.
If you had to rate what you're drinking right now, what would you? How much did it fall off for you? For this being older,
I'd probably give it a 5. But
okay.
Again, it's like it's like 8 or 9 months old at this point. Yeah. So even a Budweiser after 8 or 9 months is going to fall off, right?
Sure.
So
yeah. I would have assumed you would have said that it doesn't have very far to fall. So
it doesn't. It might have went from a 1 to a 0, but
right. That's a 100% drop though.
That is. That's true.
So I kind of like I like Crazy Little Thing Hazy Little Thing. I'm back on the Queen thing. I like Hazy Little Thing. I perhaps, as I mentioned before, maybe appreciate it a little bit better because it's kind of mellowed with age. I think there's a lot of good flavors in there. I'm really in favor of a beer. If it's an IPA, it's okay. It's not going to be ever going to be my first choice, but I really like IPAs, the ones that I do care for, where the hops don't stand in the doorway and don't let you in. I like hops that you taste it, it's there, it's definitely there, but then it kind of steps aside and lets you enjoy the rest of the beer. And I think maybe it's because of the age, or maybe this is the beer. I can't tell myself, but the hops kind of are there. They're very present, but they definitely step aside and let you enjoy some smoothness in the rest of the beer. It's really, really good. So I will give this a 7. I appreciate it, which for me, for an IPA is pretty high praise. So
that's a good average for a PNR show IPA.
Absolutely, with only me and you. And usually my ratings for IPAs drag the show grade down, but it does not in this case. All right, so Keith never made it.
Who is Keith? I don't know this person, Keith.
This maybe we're just gonna have to go to a 2-man co-hosting job, but
do we mind?
Once we get back on track, once I get back in the podcasting mode and I'm not tripping over my tongue and we've got a nice sleek show once again. I don't know that we ever had that, but once we get back to what we do, I think we're going to be knocking this out, especially in October. We've got to do a podcast every week for October at least. So we got to make that happen, right, Gary? Keith or no Keith?
I'm doing the math, and I think I can make that. I think I can make that work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm about to. I'm in the middle of opera, but we're about to start our performances, so my weeks will get much clearer very, very soon. So
awesome! All right.
Anyway, any final thoughts?
Go drink some beer. Enjoy Oktoberfest.
All right. So for Gary, and the absent Keith, he who shall no longer be named, I'm Rob. This has been the Pint of No Return Show. Recommend us to your friends, please. pnrshow.com. There you can find all the ways of contacting us, getting involved with the show, maybe even suggesting some topics for us. We'd really appreciate your feedback. Thanks a lot, and drink more beer.